All right, let's dive into the absolutely stunning story of how young voters in Botswana completely reshaped their nation's destiny in the 2024 election. I mean, this is a perfect case study in just how quickly the political ground can shift under your feet. Think about this for a second. For 58 years, pretty much since its independence, Botswana had only ever known one ruling party. The Botswana Democratic Party, the BDP. They were one of the longest ruling political dynasties in all of Africa. And then, October 2024 happened. The unthinkable. The entire political landscape was just boom, completely upended. It sent shockwaves not just through Botswana, but really across the whole continent.
So, what on earth happened here? What caused this historic political earthquake? I mean, how does a party that has ruled for nearly 6 decades suddenly get swept away like this? Well, the numbers alone are just staggering. The BDP, the party that had been in power forever, was just overwhelmingly crushed by the opposition UDC coalition. The UDC walked away with a huge 36-seat majority in parliament, while the once mighty BDP was left with just 4. I mean, talk about a complete and total reversal of fortune. To really get how this happened, you have to meet the new, decisive force in Botswana's politics. Because this wasn't just another election, you see. This was a generational takeover.
We're talking about Generation Z. These are the digitally native, super connected, and politically fired up young voters. They grew up with the internet in their pocket. And you know what? They have a totally different set of expectations for the world.
And you can just feel the power of that sentiment in this quote from Mpo, a 23-year-old student. For folks like her, this wasn't some abstract political theory. No, this was about using their power, their vote, to demand a better future. They felt like they had to take it into their own hands.
And we're not talking about a small group here. Their numbers are massive. Roughly 60% of Botswana's entire population is under the age of 35. That is a gigantic demographic wave that, until now, is kind of like a sleeping giant in the country's politics.
Okay, now this table is where it gets really interesting. You see, yeah, voters over 46 are still the single biggest chunk, but look what happens when you add up Gen Z and the young millennials, the under 35 crowd. Together, they make up more than a third of all registered voters. That is a brand new and, as it turns out, incredibly powerful electorate.
But it wasn't just their age that mattered. Something had to light the fuse, right? We have to understand the core reason that drove these young people to the polls in such massive numbers.
And it wasn't just about out with the old, in with the new. It was about something way more personal, way more urgent. It was about their futures, their jobs, their simple ability to build a life for themselves.
It really boils down to this one single number, 28%. The national unemployment rate had climbed to a crippling 28% by 2024. And that economic pain wasn't spread out evenly, oh no. It was the young people who were getting hit the hardest, staring down a future with very few opportunities.
So here's the key. The opposition, UDC, was smart. They saw this frustration and they spoke directly to it. They promised to create 500,000 jobs, to triple the minimum wage. I mean, for a generation facing that kind of unemployment, that message was music to their ears.
And this data, wow, this just lays the whole disconnect bare. This is from right before the election, and it shows this huge dissatisfaction with the BDP government. Just look at the very badly column, 42% for the youngest voters, and a whopping 58%, a clear majority, for those 26 to 35.
Looking at it this way, as a bar chart, it's just crystal clear, isn't it? The overwhelming majority of young voters felt that the government was fundamentally failing them on the single most important issue in their lives. Old party loyalties, they just couldn't compete with that reality. And it wasn't only about unemployment. On top of the lack of jobs, you had this constant drip, drip, drip of corruption scandals. We're talking about government contracts that were allegedly going to the president's own family. That stuff just completely destroys trust and adds a whole lot of fuel to the fire.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. Was what happened in Botswana just a one-off thing? Or is it maybe a sign of something much bigger happening with youth politics across the entire African continent?
Well, Botswana's youth-led revolution really stands out when you compare it to a place like Uganda. Over there, the ruling party has kind of perfected the art of controlling and, well, depoliticizing young people. They use handouts and patronage to make sure the youth don't organize as their own political force.
And it's a totally different story from its neighbor South Africa, too. They have similarly high youth unemployment,
But the reaction there has been the opposite. It's led to disillusionment and young people just not voting. Not the kind of mass mobilization we just saw in Botswana.
So what's the big lesson here? What are the lasting impacts of this one election? Because this isn't just a story about Botswana, it's a story with lessons for the whole world.
What this election really shows us is that economic pain can absolutely demolish a political legacy, especially when a new generation shows up to vote. These young voters, they don't have those old, baked-in loyalties to parties from the past. They care about results, right now. It's a massive warning shot to entrenched powers everywhere.
And all of this leaves us with a really powerful question. On a continent that has the youngest population on Earth, is Botswana's youthquake a preview of what's to come? A future where young people don't just ask for change, they show up and vote for it.